Hello and welcome to Encounter Mercy, the Catholic podcast with Vince Dragone and Father Andy. How's it going, Andy?
It's going all right, Vince. How about you?
It's going pretty good for the most part. Did a lot of house cleaning.
Yeah, I was gonna
This
say I heard that the missus had you um, be cleaning out your basement today.
Yeah, but there's gonna be good things that come out of that.
Well, that's good.
I'll reveal those later down the line, but it has to do with brewing beer, so
Okay. I see.
it's slightly selfish.
Well, I'm gonna have to take some of that myself. I mean, just a sample, obviously.
Oh yeah, you'll have plenty. But speaking of selfishness, that's going to go along with our topic today, I believe. But before we get into it, how was your week?
Okay, I'm just trying to think back to this week. I mean, everything's such a blur. I was talking with another priest on the phone yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that there's really nowhere to go, and there's
No.
nothing to do. Being that our work is mainly with people, and since we can't meet with people or be around people, it's kind of difficult. So all the days start to blur together, and then I come up with really stupid projects. Like last week, I think I talked about the fact I took apart my stove. This week, I moved all of the furniture in the house and cleaned under it. I, did random things. Uh, Rearranged my bedroom for the third time since I've been home from the Holy Land. Stupid things just because I'm a little bored. Oh, and
Well,
I did yard work. It was 70 here on Saturday, so I was out in the yard. I was pulling out all of the uh, uh, hoses and getting things ready because it's starting to get warmer. And then today, what does it do? But it rains all day and is no higher than 40.
oh, it was
So,
freezing.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, welcome to my world, man. Having two kids, two small little kids, we don't go out and do a whole lot either. So when I get home from work, it's the same. Well, it's the same now as it was last year at this time.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't change it. There's a lot of. It's kind of nice to just be able to sit at home and do little projects around the house that sometimes just don't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I got little projects I'm working on, little things I can tinker with, but it's now it's just still the waiting on the getting of the parts to finish the other projects. But hey,
Nice, nice. So let's get right into it. I guess today's topic. You may have heard this. Most people have heard this. The phrase, Andy, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious.
yeah. Yeah. I've heard that way too often. I don't buy into all this organized religion. I'm more spiritual and about the spirit.
Yeah, I don't need anyone telling me what to do. I don't need, I don't need a pope telling me that, or a pope that's going to intercede for me to God. I can go right to God, even if I believe in God. I might not. If I'm just spiritual, that can literally mean anything. It could mean that the ants on the ground are the ones who created the universe, or it could just be the stars, or it could be some other deities, or whatever it is. There's so many different. I don't know. It's we're gonna get a little bit into that today, but um, how often do you actually hear this as a priest?
Being that usually I'm around parishioners, I'm around people that are buying into the faith. I don't hear it as much, but I can guarantee you that if I was working more in a college campus ministry setting, even in a Catholic college, that you'd hear that. There's people that that I know from college that would buy into this 100%.
Oh,
Even
sure.
people that I have known since grade school that I went to, we ended up going to college together and being in some classes. I can hear them saying, I'm more spiritual, or I don't buy into any of that. I'm just about me. And that's the key when we start talking about the spirituality versus the religious, because the problem is we as a secular society have destroyed that word spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't divorce spirituality from religiosity. You can't divorce the two because they go hand in hand. The minute that you separate them is when we start to get into these problems that we seem to find ourselves in.
Right, and anything becomes spiritual, literally anything, and it usually is all self-serving at the end. But I see this. I know a lot of people who subscribe to this,
Sure.
And it's to me, it's very primitive. Um, we start with, when we talk about Christianity, we start with the spiritual side of things. We recognize that there is something greater than the physical world, and uh, and that's where a lot of these people also believe. They just, instead of asking the next question, okay, well, what is that? They just kind of stop there, and hey, whatever it is, whatever floats your boat. It makes me feel good. It gives me good vibes, or whatever it is. That they believe, but they fail to take the step of trying to find the truth. We are, as humans, we're always looking to find the truth. And if you were to find a religion that seems to be true, both historically and the if you pray and you hear God talking to you, and you see other people's witness to it, that's all part of truth. And if you learn that truth, you then have to, as someone who doesn't want to go against truth, have to subscribe to that religion. And that's kind of where I am, and that's probably where you are, because you know it to be true, so you believe it. But it's, the people who just look at this spiritual but not religious, I just feel like they just kind of stop there, and they just, but that's how a lot of our lives are lived. Just people that drop out of college because they just don't feel like doing anything, or people who lose their job, go job to job, and never trying to improve themselves. Or maybe it's a sport that you play and you can just never get any better because you don't even really try. It could be me on guitar. I've kind of reached my the peak that I've reached because I failed to put in the practice to get better. And I feel that that's probably the same way some of these people act whenever they say they're just spiritual but not religious.
Yeah, I think that can be part of it. A lot of times when dealing with this situation, the person that is going to give them the most information about these situations in their life isn't going to be a priest or someone that is in the religion. It's going to be, as one of the professors at Gannon used to say, Dr. Google.
Oh yes.
And so, if you type in spiritual versus religious, you get a bunch of, well, junk. And just happens to be one of the sites that I came across. It starts to separate religion versus spirituality. And you can tell that there's already a bias. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. No matter what, no matter who's writing something, there's a bias. But this bias is very obvious because they start splitting things from religion and spirituality. So they say religion, by definition, is a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices, the service and worship of God or the supernatural. But then they separate out spirituality and they say that spirituality, on the other hand, connotes an experience of connection to something larger than themselves. Well, now, I don't know, Vince. Maybe just my time in seminary formation and spirituality formation and spiritual formation and spiritual direction and spiritual life and diocesan priestly spirituality. Maybe all this study has clouded my visions. There's clouded my visions, and I just don't understand anymore. But it's still, like I said before, you can't have one without the other.
No, you can't. The way that you just kind of read that, I guess the way that article is written, I could. Are you wearing a blue shirt right now?
Sort of.
I'm
Yeah.
wearing red. So if I just wanted to make an argument that, hey, my shirt's better because it's red, that's kind of how that
Well, and now
whole.
you're making it a political statement. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh well, I didn't mean to go there, but whatever it is, you have a beard right now. I don't. I had to shave. Uh, your beard is disgusting, and
Extremely.
it looks terrible,
Ugh.
and you seem lazy because you have a beard, and I'm clean shaven, so that means I'm clean, and I put in the discipline to be able to do it. That
Side
to
note,
me,
I
that
haven't
was
shaved
it
you.
was just such a weak, childish argument,
Oh God,
um,
yes.
for what that
Just
is.
just a random side note. I haven't shaved. I've had a beard since spring of 2015. So maybe it's time.
Nah, keep it rocking. Let it
A little
ride.
long, but well, exactly. And it's trying to make arguments here that aren't there.
Exactly.
You know, and then if you tried to, you know, they claim, well, the lines blur. Well, yeah, no kidding, because they're not supposed to be separated.
Right. You don't
You,
bastardize them.
your religion and your spirituality, they need to come together and they need to be one. You know, one of the things in seminary that they always taught us was, let's say you have to, especially once you get to theology, once you're doing your studies, you have to take that to prayer. Well, what in the hell does that mean? So let's say I'm studying something for canon law, I have to take that to prayer. Well, it kind of makes sense once you start getting deeper into the study of the faith that you need to take all of the things that you're learning to prayer to see where Christ is in them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that being said, that's automatically an entrance into the spiritual life. So you're taking these thoughts, these teachings of a religion, and you are spiritualizing them and bringing them into your forefront. But the problem is, with our world, they automatically say that religion, bad, bad, bad. As they say, religion, houses of worship, books of laws, eternal rituals, observances. These are equivalent of object referral, in which your attention is placed upon the objects in your experience, whereas spirituality leans more to a self-referral or the internalization of your awareness. But the problem is if it's one or the other, you're missing a whole experience. You
Yeah.
know, one of the things that this is the reason why some of this thought process and this teaching becomes a problem is because it can start to lead into heresy. There was a heresy. Now, see, I remember the themes of the heresies from class. So if anybody's out there and actually knows the name of them, that'd be great. I don't think this one is Gnosticism, because that's one of a hidden truth that's only revealed to specific people. But there is a heresy that says our bodies, bad, bad, bad. Physical reality, bad, bad, bad. And so we need to get rid of that and only be spiritual. And that crept its way into Christianity under the guise of Manichaeism. And so Manichaeism, one of the major teachings is that the human body is bad. Human's body bad. We only have it because we have to while we're here on this earth. So we don't really need to worry too much about it. We got to take care of it so we can live. But other than that, it doesn't matter.
Well, I know
That
Martin Luther had some of those thoughts as well.
he did. He and he revised his thoughts as life went on. But in the same breath, but that was one of the major things of, that there were a lot of people in his time that were
Mm-hmm.
starting to feel this way. And one of them is actually St. Augustine. St. Augustine was a Manichaeist before he became a Catholic. He practiced this practice of Manichaeism, and he realized that this was not a way of life, and it ended up being that Manichaeism and this idea that the human body's bad has been condemned by the church because our physical body is important. And why do I say that? Well, it all goes back to Christ. There is the belief, was Christ truly God or truly man? He can't be both. That's what their people are saying. So one side says truly God, therefore the body bad. Where do you think this now is leading to?
Mm.
Versus the body is good, or well, not even good, but it's just the fact that Christ was just this wonderful prophet. He wasn't God, so therefore he's not a God and not a deity. And that leads to a problem. He's both and God legitimizes with becoming man our humanness, our physicalness, our personality, us as human beings. The fact that I am fat and lazy, that is a part of me that I could change, yes, but as all the listeners, and if any of my friends are listening to this, I'm not going to at the moment, but that's besides the point. But the point is that our human physicalness, our bodies, our everything about us, it's important. It's not something that you can, like they say, go outside yourself. Well, that's not possible because my only experience of life is the physical.
Right. Hey, go back and reread that part of the article from the Huffington Post one about what is religion and all the bad things that it listed off.
Oh, let's see. Uh, most mystical sects are also religious as they worship the same deities. For example, there's no Hindu mystical tradition as a standalone expression from the massive Hinduism religion, because those smaller sects continue to worship the same gods, such as Krishna or Shiva and the rest of the Hindus.
Read the part about where it said, all these things are detract
Oh,
from the self.
the whole test your belief.
Well, what you just read before, just reread it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so spirituality leans more towards a self-referral on the internalization of your awareness of your soul. Spirituality is an inward journey that involves a shift in awareness rather than some form of external activity. As such, spirituality is much more about the inner understanding than outer worship. This is not to say that worship is not a part of spirituality. It is a matter on where the devotion and worship are directed.
Yeah,
To
usually.
to an inner or to an external practice, object, or figurehead, or to an inner soul, your higher self, or the divinity that lies within.
Yeah, so the selfishness. So what I was trying to get you to say was, before you were saying how, and that was part of it, but on the religious side was, you go to these buildings and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
these are just objects. Well, that's not what it is. We're all experiencing right now having to have our religion at home right now. We're not going to a physical church. We're not doing these physical things that we would normally do, outside of our homes and such. And it's not detracting from our well, some could argue that you're not in the if you're not in the right setting in a church, it's harder to pray, and I get that. I can't wait to go back and pray in a church. But the kind of the biggest thing I took away from that is it all detracts from myself. And if it detracts from myself, then it's not good. And so where have we ended up in the last several decades here? I'm using the words decades again from our last episode. But everything consumerism. Let's look at, we need to go shop. I need to go shopping. I need a new pair of jeans. I need this. I need that. I need to have the better car. I need to have the bigger house. I need to have the bigger salary so it looks like, I'm successful. Everything around us right now in the secular world is built on selfishness. It's all surrounded by me. So what do you expect? What do you expect with all this new stuff coming out? That why would I want to worship someone else? Why would I want to give my time to somebody else when I'm the one who creates this? I create my own world, and therefore I'm the one who I need to pay respect to, not anybody else. So, I mean,
one of the number one books that people or that book publishers are going to put out there are self-help books.
Mm-hmm.
And the recognition is that the power you need right now is in you, and you can do this because you are you and you are good. And there is some legitimacy to understanding that we are good. God made us good. He made us good because he made us in his image and likeness. But that key right there is, it's not pointing inward. He made us good because we are made like him. And so the inner self is not where we're going to get the affirmation, the positive, the goodness. If we keep feeding into that, it begins to speak to a very narcissistic mindset.
Mm-hmm. The biggest thing that I've seen the last couple of weeks among some of my social circles are, people looking into meditation and ways to relieve stress because of this whole coronavirus thing. And one thing I continue to hear over and over again is I'm just focusing on what I can control, and I'm letting go of everything that I can't control. And they sit there and people just meditate on themselves and trying to just calm down. And the some of the biggest issues that I see with that are, God loves you so much that he wants us to bring our problems to him. Yeah. And he wants us to have redemptive suffering. And we've talked about that in I think a couple of previous episodes.
Yeah.
But don't just pretend those things don't exist. If it's bothering you, take it to God. Yeah. You can't ignore those things. And, you know, well, I forget exactly where I was going to go. But basically, anything that puts the focus on you is wrong. God wants us to focus on him, and he wants us to bring our problems to him.
Right. And I think the one of the directions that I think we can easily go from what you were saying is, this whole idea. There's two things that I want to kind of spin off with this. Is first off, spiritual people will try to claim that religion is exclusive because it sets boundaries, and spirituality is inclusive. The problem is that spirituality is it's disguising itself in what they want to call inclusive, but it's truly exclusive because it's all about the self and looking inward.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas religion is looking outward and learning about God surrounding us and through his words and through his works and through his mercies and graces and everything with that. And then the other thing is, spiritual people will want to say that religion is all about fear-mongering, whereas spirituality is, by contrast, discards the vestiges of fear and worry in favor of a more loving, compassionate approach to life. Well, and there's a problem with that, because the whole love versus fear. When we think about the word love, what do you think, Vince? And this, maybe this is right, maybe this is wrong, but what do you think, Vince, is the opposite of love?
Hate?
No. Indifference.
Yes.
Indifference, because if you let's say you love something. Let's say I'm just going to go very stupid and go chocolate ice cream. Let's say you love chocolate ice cream. You have feelings for that, right? Let's say you hate vanilla ice cream. You have feelings for that. But if you're indifferent about it, there's no feeling there.
I see where you're going.
And so there is the opposite of love isn't hate, but it's indifference. And that attitude of, I can only control what I can control, and I'm not going to think about anything else, it makes sense. It makes sense for someone who's constantly a alpha person who wants to be in charge of everything, that's how they're going to they have to think. A lot of very poorly explaining, but a lot of extroverts are automatically going to think that way of like, I got to control this. This is under my control and I have control. No. And so when we are thinking about it's under my control, well, no, it's really not under my control. And so by saying, well, I'm not going to think about anything that I can't control, that's indifference. That's the opposite of love and hate, because you just are trying to become indifferent to it. What God wants from us is, in our meditation, is to focus on him. If we read through the Psalms, if you read through the Psalms and you pay attention to what's going on in the Psalms, there are Psalms about love, there are Psalms about hate, there are Psalms about joy, there are Psalms about anger, there are Psalms about sorrow, there are Psalms about confusion, there are Psalms about destruction, there are Psalms about building up. There's Psalms about every feeling, every emotion that the human being has. Why? It's not so that our emotions can overtake us and control us. It's about so that we can allow the Lord to speak to us in our moments of feeling these emotions and allow him to guide us. And that's real meditation. But meditation that focuses inward completely ignores the reality that is around us.
And, what else does that do? But, it affirms actions that you take that may be contrary to what we would say, what we should do. So what we would call a sin. Someone who just takes it upon themselves and looks in it of themselves, they're going to convince themselves that whatever they're doing, whether they're sleeping around, whether they're gossiping, no matter what it is that they're doing, abusing drugs, whatever it is, they can just affirm that because their inner self told them that it's okay.
One thing that we have to understand about moral law, because that's one of the areas that we're getting into, is moral law. When it comes to moral law, something has to be, when you make a moral ruling, the decision has to be semper et pro semper, as Father Afnugo taught us in class, always and forever. Therefore, it has to work all across the board. So people who try to say, well, this works for me, but it's only for me in a moral understanding. Let's put it this way. Well, you know what? Only people that are raped can have an abortion. Well, no, there's a problem there. There's a problem there because when we're talking about that specific thing, the issue is that focus isn't on the reality that's happening there, and that's the death of a child. That's the death of a new person. And when we try to make an argument that says, well, only in this situation is this morally obliged. Well, no, a moral ruling has to be made that it can be put across the boards.
Right.
For
There's no
instance,
exception.
contraception's only okay in Africa because there's so much rampant STDs. No, because then that would make it legal everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Contraception's okay in China because of overpopulation. No, because then that would make it legal everywhere. It's easy to see in the sexual sins. It becomes a bit more difficult to see in spiritual sins. But the key is when a moral judgment is made, it has to be made across the board. And so we have to be very careful with our with what we're saying, with how we are speaking. It can't be for me and not for you. And that's the problem with spirituality, is that once again the focus is back on me, not on the world around you, not on those who need the help. When we pray, our prayers are not just for ourselves, they are for other people, because we believe that our prayers are going to God, and God, who is here with us, who is listening to us, is here to answer our prayers.
And our prayers are also joined with everyone else who is praying.
Right.
Alive and dead.
Right. It's fascinating. It's fascinating because once again, if we go back to Dr. Google, and Dr. Google continues to tell us about this, one part of a paragraph of an article says the following.
Well, Guru Google, do you mean?
Guru Google. It's very easy to discover if you are a religious or a spiritual person. So already, let's take this test. All right. Number 1, do you worship any type of deity or a god or a sect leader? This includes popular yoga gods such as Ganesh or Rama, and so-called gurus, masters, or what was the other word? Oh, shoot, I lost it. Mentors. Then you are religious. Or number 2, do you believe in the power of your own self and that you are in charge of your destiny? In this case, my child, you are spiritual. The problem here remains. I said this from the beginning. How can one be spiritual but not religious, or religious but not spiritual? Well, easy. If you decide you want to be spiritual, then the focus is on self. But if you decide that you want to focus solely on a religion, then it's all an act. There's no love in it. And I'm not talking like, oh, this evilness. No, I'm talking about there's no true connection to God. It is possible, but it's not something that we should be called to. Because like I said before, and we've said this over and over again, you cannot divorce spirituality from religion, because spirituality is an important part of religion. Yet this new modern understanding of spirituality, being that you believe in the power of yourself, is wrong. The first key of Catholicism is that we believe and we understand that we cannot do this by ourselves, but rather we rely on that higher power. AA, NASA, all of those anonymous programs, they don't require you to become Christian, but they were started by Catholics because there was a recognition that we can only do this by relying on a higher power. And Jesus Christ came to this earth to tell us that we had to rely on him. He never came to say that we can do it ourselves. He said we have to trust in him, to trust in God, to have faith, to believe in what we have been taught. And I don't know. Once again, maybe it was my seminary professors brainwashing me. Maybe it's from a case of stupidity. But I'm telling you this. If you have a true experience of God, a true experience of Jesus Christ, there will be no question. There will be no question to whether or not you believe in him and want to follow him. And what did he say? He told us to follow him, to do as he commands. If that makes me a bad person because that makes me religious, well, I guess, Vince, I'm a bad person.
Hey, I'll drink to that. You don't have a drink.
Vince, like you said, you encounter a lot of people in your life that kind of think this way and talk this way. What do you think are some ways that we have to deal with this and address this?
This is a tough one because we've talked about in the past that, just one conversation isn't going to convert people. It doesn't usually happen. I bet you 1 in a million. There's always going to be that one case that you're going to say something and someone's going to be like, oh, wow, they have this light bulb moment. And then they dive in and convert, sign up for RCIA right away. But, the way I see it and the way I like to go about things is I love to use apologetics. Now, I'm not the best at it, but that's what brought me back into the faith more seriously a couple of years ago. And, so I like to try to use logic and reasoning the best I can, and trying to show historical examples. We have, God has used people throughout history to work, he's used people for his works. He's used prophets in the Old Testament. He used Jesus Christ. And these are historical figures. These aren't just made up people in the Bible. You can look at other writings of the time. There's no doubt that Jesus lived. There's no doubt that some of these prophets lived. They've been written about by people by Romans who at the time were pagans. Why were they writing about it? Why were they affirming this if it goes against what they believed? So we can look at it from a historical perspective. So you could bring up something like that. You can bring up your own. You can be a witness to your own faith and just live that out. You don't even have to say anything. Just the fact that you love the person. You can pray for the person. You can be a good Catholic throughout your daily life around that person, which we should all be doing anyway. Sure, we all end up messing up at some point. That's why we have confession. But that's another way. Is just you don't even have to say anything. Just live out your Catholic life, your Christian life. And believe it or not, that's probably some of the more powerful ways a lot of people convert is just by looking at other Christians. That's how a lot of pagans converted in the early church, was just watching how Christians handled pandemics and epidemics and in war and all these other things, poverty, and how Christians took care of each other. And pagans were looking at them saying, well, why is this person helping this other person? We don't do that. We save ourselves. And that's kind of where, if you look at the spiritual versus religious side of things, the spiritual, it's just about saving yourself.
Yeah.
The religious, we're trying to save everybody, or not the spiritual and religious. As Christians, we're trying to save everybody. So, there's a variety of different ways you can start, and you can, as I mentioned before, humans are always looking for truth. And so that if you find something that is to be true, even if it's a little nugget, you're going to want to investigate it a little bit farther and farther and farther until you come to the whole truth. And some of us are still on that path. Still, you don't have, like I said, one conversation is not going to do anything. But as long as you can plant that seed that begins to grow, or maybe it's a seed that doesn't germinate, and years later something is said, they see something, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, that takes me back to, a couple of years ago, this conversation I had again, with this weird Catholic. And maybe that's where it starts. So there's so many different ways, and don't be discouraged if the person says, well, hey, you do you, I'll do me, because chances are that's what's going to be said. But you can always try to plant that seed.
Yeah. We got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got anything else?
That's it for me.
Yeah, me too. So
I got my soapbox taken care of for now.
Well, you do that every week, and that's okay.
That's my job.
That's your job, and I think that's what the people like. So I guess with that, you can find us at encountermercy.com. Subscribe to us where you listen to podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. and find all of our social media. Follow us and engage with us. Until next time, peace.